My name's Derek Bishton. I was born in Birmingham, and after university, I trained as a journalist. I worked in Newcastle, and then in the mid 70s, I came back to Birmingham to work at the Birmingham Post. And it's there that and at that point, that I got involved in Birmingham's alternative publishing scene through Grapevine magazine, which was a weekly, bi-weekly what's on guide to the city with a few sort of political and football type articles, interviews with pop stars, the usual stuff. Um, the politics of Grapevine were really to really question some of the decisions that the city council were making with regard to housing, with regard to inner city policy, with regard to the kind of issues that were emerging in terms of race relations and so on. So those were the sorts of issues that Grapevine was particularly involved in, and they were ones that I myself found myself drawn to as well. I think the magazine was, as the alternative press that had grown up in the 60s and was still around in the early 70s, was really looking to kind of posit alternatives to. I mean, it was a period, if most of the people seeing this would be too young to remember, but it was a period of extreme political crisis in the world. We had been through the whole sort of revolutions of the late 60s, and then there was this terrible letdown in the 70s with the oil crisis, the 3-day week. There was a sense that people were looking for some alternative to the situations that they found themselves in. And magazines like Grapevine really tapped into that, and there was a big audience for it in the city at that time. 10/8 magazine was set up really because one of the things that had interested me as a sort of nascent photographer, because by then I had started to carry a camera around and take photographs in my locality in Handsworth. One of the things that really bothered me was that there was no centre, there was no place that you could go to where you could meet like-minded people, meet people who were, kind of discovering photography. There was no gallery, there was no cultural scene at all around the currency of images at all. And one of the things that I tried to initiate was to interest West Midlands Arts in funding an art gallery, a gallery specifically for photography. There was no way that they were interested in bricks and mortar because the amount of money required for that, even though there were lots and lots of appropriate buildings in Birmingham at that point, because the industrial crisis was really biting and there was a lot of property to be had cheaply. West Midlands Arts weren't interested in that. And so the next best thing was really to produce a magazine. So 10/8 started effectively as a way of linking myself, Brian Homer and John Reardon had then joined us at Sidelines when we launched 10/8 magazine, was a way of trying to really kind of connect with other photographers in the city. So it was primarily envisaged as a West Midlands focused gathering point for people interested in photography and photographic issues. At that point, we had moved. Brian and I had started an informal working relationship a year or so earlier, because following the closure of Grapevine magazine, Brian had started as a sort of independent freelance designer to the alternative community in Birmingham, if I can put it that way. And he had secured a contract with the Community Development Project in Saltley to produce a series of reports, their final reports. This was a Home Office funded research project into the causes of inner city decline, and they proposed to produce a series of final reports as the project came to an end. They asked Brian if he would, because he was known as a sort of a publisher and someone who had experience of producing magazines. They asked him if he would like to do them. He felt the job was so big that he kind of turned to me and said, would I be interested in working with him? So we started work on that. We worked in various locations. We worked in Handsworth at the old Lascelles Social Development Centre, sadly no longer there, on Heathfield Road. And then when Handsworth Law Centre moved out of their small building in Grove Lane, Handsworth, we moved in and turned it into a little design studio. And that's where all of these projects had their, kind of their origin. It was really a group of people who were interested in photography coming together. It was a collective in that sense. It had at its heart Brian and myself, because we produced it and we designed it and we acted as the point where everybody came together. But in terms of its editorial direction, it was really a case of because we had an open door policy. We had the feeling that if you had something interesting to say, we should be able to provide the platform. I mean, that was really one of the whole, guiding principles of everything that we did. We were there really to give voice to the multitude of voices that really existed particularly in Handsworth, and I use Handsworth as a symbol for the inner city, for people who were working against the grain, as it were. So it was a collective of people, and it changed. People came in, people dropped out, different editors came along with different projects. We enjoyed it that way because obviously, if somebody comes in and they've got a particular bee in their bonnet about a specific issue, you're going to get the kind of intensity that you need to get a good editorial product together. But people can't necessarily individually sustain that continuously. So it was an open door policy, and it quickly moved from being a West Midlands magazine to a national magazine to an international magazine.